At 40,000 feet above the Mediterranean, where secrets whisper through pressurized cabins and billion-dollar deals are sealed with champagne, one forbidden affair would end in blood, betrayal, and a mystery that haunts the Swiss Alps to this day. In the exclusive world of private aviation, where the ultra-wealthy glide between continents like gods among mortals, trust is currency and discretion is survival. But on October 23, inside the cabin of a Boeing 737 MAX racing through the night sky toward Zurich, both would shatter as violently as the silence that followed a single gunshot. Kamal al-Zahrani's body lay slumped against Italian leather, his chest torn open by a bullet from his own antique pistol. Blood pooled beneath his $30,000 Patek Philippe watch, still ticking as his life ebbed away. The cabin lights cast eerie shadows across his lifeless face, once animated by the confidence of a man who believed he owned everything he touched. But his killer had already disappeared into the void, leaving investigators with an impossible puzzle. How does someone vanish from an aircraft 7 miles above the earth? This is the story of Avery Cole, a 25-year-old flight attendant who thought she could play in the world of Dubai's elite, and the powerful man who taught her that some games end in death. Avery's journey began not in the glittering towers of Dubai, but in the sprawling suburbs of Phoenix, Arizona, where strip malls stretch endlessly beneath a merciless sun. Born to a family where paychecks disappeared as quickly as desert rain, she learned early that survival meant dreaming beyond the horizon. Her mother cleaned houses for wealthy Scottsdale families, coming home with stories of marble countertops and walk-in closets larger than their entire apartment. Her father worked construction, his hands permanently stained with concrete dust and disappointment. When Elite Airways posted recruitment advertisements for flight attendants to serve their ultra-exclusive clientele, Avery saw her chance. The Dubai-based company catered to billionaires, royalty, and power brokers who demanded absolute discretion and flawless service. She was ambitious, romantic, and dangerously naive about power dynamics. The psychological profile compiled by Elite Airways noted her exceptional adaptability and strong desire for upward mobility, traits they valued in employees who would witness conversations that could topple governments and move markets. Across the world, in the glittering Emirate of Dubai, Kamal al-Zahrani built his empire one calculated move at a time. At 52, he commanded al-Zahrani Holdings, a conglomerate that stretched its tentacles through real estate developments from London to Mumbai, oil investments in Kazakhstan, and political connections that reached into the highest echelons of Gulf royalty. To the outside world, Kamal embodied success wrapped in traditional values. His marriage to Dr. Layla al-Zahrani appeared to be a union of equals. She, a respected neurologist, and he, the visionary businessman. Their 22-year-old son Omar studied philosophy at Oxford. But behind the philanthropic galas and family photos lurked a man who collected people like trophies. Kamal's private office contained more than financial documents. He kept detailed psychological profiles of everyone in his orbit, studying human nature the way other men studied stock portfolios, always searching for the pressure points that would give him absolute control. The collision between these two worlds began on March 15, aboard Elite Airways Flight EW-457, a private Boeing 737 MAX departing Dubai International Airport for Milan's Malpensa. The aircraft itself was a testament to luxury, hand-stitched leather seats, gold-plated fixtures, and a bedroom suite that rivals had nicknamed the Palace in the Sky. For Kamal, it was simply another day traveling between his various business interests. For Avery, beginning her third week with the company, it was another opportunity to prove herself worthy of the world she desperately wanted to join. When Kamal boarded that morning, she noticed him immediately, not just because his name was whispered with reverence throughout the airline, but because of the way he carried himself. Power radiated from him like heat from desert stones, and when his dark eyes met hers during the safety demonstration, she felt something shift in the air between them. His calculated charm was legendary among Dubai's elite. As she served his breakfast, Belgian waffles with Turkish honey, exactly as specified in his passenger profile, he complimented her efficiency with words that seemed casual but felt weighted with hidden meaning. "You have eyes that have seen too little of the world," he said, his voice carrying the faint accent that marked him as a man who moved seamlessly between cultures. "But that will change." Avery's internal monologue battled between professional caution and undeniable attraction. She had been warned about passengers who might blur the lines of appropriate behavior, but nothing in her training had prepared her for someone like Kamal. He spoke to her as if she were already part of his world, asking about her dreams, her ambitions, her plans for the future. The power dynamic was established with surgical precision. As the flight descended toward Milan, Kamal mentioned almost offhandedly that he owned a controlling stake in Elite Airways, along with half a dozen other luxury service companies. When they landed at Malpensa, he handed her a tip that made her breath catch. $500, more than she had made in her best week at the Phoenix restaurant. For exceptional service, he said, though they both knew the money represented something far more complex than gratitude. She couldn't know that in Kamal's private notebook, filled with observations about people who had caught his interest, he had already written her name. Next to it, in his precise handwriting, were two words that would have terrified her if she had seen them: perfect target. The seeds of obsession had been planted on both sides during that single flight. The game had begun, though only one of them knew the rules. What followed was a masterclass in seduction disguised as coincidence. 3 weeks after the Milan flight, Avery found herself assigned to another route with Kamal, Dubai to Paris, a 7-hour journey that would test every boundary she thought she understood. This time, his approach was different, more deliberate. As they cruised over the Persian Gulf, he invited her to join him for dinner during their Paris layover. "There's a restaurant near the Louvre," he said casually, "where they serve the best coq au vin in the city. It would be a shame to visit Paris and not experience it properly." Avery's training screamed caution, but the way he looked at her, as if she were the only person in the world worth his attention, made her pulse quicken. She declined politely, citing company policy about fraternizing with passengers. Kamal simply smiled, that knowing expression that suggested he was already 3 moves ahead in a game she didn't realize she was playing. "Of course," he said. "Professional boundaries are important. I respect that about you." But respect, she would learn, was just another weapon in his arsenal. The third flight changed everything. Dubai to London, with a layover at Heathrow that stretched into an unexpected 12-hour delay due to fog. When Kamal suggested they meet for coffee at Harrods, Avery found herself saying yes before her rational mind could intervene. What harm could there be in coffee? They were both stranded anyway, and he was, after all, a valued passenger who deserved exceptional service. The coffee became lunch, lunch became an afternoon walking through Hyde Park, and the afternoon became something that felt dangerously close to a date. Kamal was charming without being overwhelming, asking thoughtful questions about her dreams, her fears, her plans for the future. When she mentioned her love of photography, he purchased a vintage Leica camera from a shop in Covent Garden, presenting it to her as if it were nothing more than a business card. "Every artist needs proper tools," he said, his fingers brushing hers as he handed over the elegant leather case. By the 4th flight, the inevitable had become undeniable. Dubai to Rome, with Kamal's usual suite booked in the aircraft's private bedroom. As turbulence rocked the plane over the Mediterranean, Avery found herself checking on his comfort more frequently than strictly necessary. When she brought him his evening cognac, their eyes met in the soft amber lighting of the bedroom cabin, and the space between them seemed to collapse. The kiss happened as naturally as breathing, though nothing about it felt innocent. Kamal's hands framed her face with the possessiveness of a man claiming territory, and when she melted against him, she felt the last of her professional distance evaporate like morning mist. "I've been thinking about this since Milan," he whispered against her ear, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had orchestrated every moment leading to this one. The transformation that followed was swift and intoxicating. Within weeks, Avery's life had become unrecognizable. Her modest Dubai apartment, provided by Elite Airways, suddenly seemed cramped and shabby compared to the penthouse suite at Burj Al Arab where Kamal installed her during their secret weekends. The hotel's staff treated her with the deference reserved for royalty, never questioning her presence or asking uncomfortable questions about the man who paid for everything. Shopping trips to Paris became routine. Kamal would fly her to the Champs-Élysées on a Friday afternoon, where personal shoppers at Hermes, Chanel, and Louis Vuitton waited with pre-selected items in her size. Her closet filled with clothes that cost more than her parents' annual income, silk dresses that whispered against her skin, handbags crafted by artisans who had perfected their craft over generations, shoes that made her feel like she was walking on clouds. Her social media accounts began documenting a life that seemed stolen from a luxury travel magazine. Sunset dinners on Kamal's Mykonos villa terrace, where the Aegean Sea stretched endlessly toward a horizon painted in gold and crimson. Weekend trips to his London penthouse, where she posed next to the Monet he had mentioned during their first conversation. Each post garnered hundreds of likes from Elite Airways colleagues who couldn't understand how their fellow flight attendant had suddenly gained access to such rarefied air. But even as her external world transformed, Avery found herself becoming increasingly isolated from her past. Phone calls to her Phoenix friends became infrequent, then stopped altogether. Their questions about her new lifestyle felt intrusive. Their concerns about the speed of her transformation sounded like jealousy. When her mother called to ask about the designer clothes in her Instagram photos, Avery found herself crafting elaborate lies about generous passengers and employee perks. The secret world they inhabited operated by rules she was still learning. Kamal gave her a new phone, encrypted, untraceable, for their private communications. He called her Desert Rose, a name that made her feel exotic and precious. She began calling him King, which seemed to please him immensely. Their messages were passionate but careful, full of coded language that would seem innocent to outside observers but carried deeper meaning for them. His gifts became more elaborate and more controlling. The Cartier watch was beautiful, its diamond-studded face catching light like captured stars. But Avery didn't know it contained a GPS tracker that allowed Kamal to monitor her movements. The Hermes purse was crafted from the finest leather, but hidden in its lining was a device that could record conversations. When she mentioned having dinner with a male colleague from the airline, Kamal's response was swift and subtle. Dubai can be dangerous for young women who make poor choices. I worry about you when you're not with me. The first crack in paradise appeared during a seemingly routine evening in his Dubai penthouse. Avery was arranging flowers in the kitchen when Kamal's phone rang. Without thinking, she answered it, expecting to take a message. Instead, she heard a woman's voice, cultured, concerned, speaking in rapid Arabic before switching to accented English. Habibi, where are you? Omar's flight lands in 2 hours and he's expecting us both at dinner. The silence that followed felt like free fall. Avery had known about Dr. Layla Al-Zarani intellectually, but hearing her voice made her suddenly, brutally real. When Kamal emerged from his shower to find Avery standing frozen with his phone in her hand, his expression shifted from surprise to something much colder. He took the phone without a word, spoke briefly in Arabic, then hung up. That was my wife, he said simply, as if stating the weather. She was wondering where I was. The fight that followed was their first real one, and it revealed fault lines that Avery hadn't wanted to acknowledge. She demanded transparency, honesty, some acknowledgement that what they shared meant more than stolen moments between his real life. Kamal's response was measured and devastating. You knew the terms from the beginning. I never promised you anything beyond what we have. Standing in his kitchen, surrounded by luxury that suddenly felt hollow, Avery faced a truth that shattered her romantic delusions. She wasn't his girlfriend. She wasn't even his mistress in any traditional sense. She was his secret, something to be hidden and compartmentalized, enjoyed in private but never acknowledged in the light of day. But by then, it was already too late to walk away. She was in too deep, had sacrificed too much, and needed too desperately to believe that love could conquer the growing darkness she sensed beneath his perfect facade. 6 months into their affair, Avery Cole had become someone she no longer recognized. The confident young woman who had boarded that first flight to Milan had been replaced by someone whose entire existence revolved around a man who treated her like a beautiful toy, cherished when convenient, forgotten when not. Her obsession had grown like a cancer, metastasizing through every aspect of her life until nothing remained untouched by Kamal's influence. She checked his location obsessively through the airline's scheduling system, memorizing his travel patterns, volunteering for every flight he booked. When other flight attendants were assigned to his routes, Avery found reasons to switch shifts, trade assignments, do whatever it took to ensure she remained in his orbit. Her colleagues began to whisper about her increasingly erratic behavior, the way she would stare at her encrypted phone during briefings, waiting for messages that sometimes never came. The isolation from her old life was complete. Her Phoenix friends had given up trying to reach her after months of cancelled plans and unanswered calls. Her parents' weekly check-ins became sources of anxiety rather than comfort. How could she explain that she was living a double life funded by a married billionaire? The lies became easier with practice, but they also built walls around her heart that seemed impossible to tear down. Paranoia began to poison even her happiest moments with Kamal. When he was tender, she wondered if he was saying goodbye. When he was distant, she convinced herself he was already planning her replacement. She had seen how efficiently he could compartmentalize his life, and the terrifying thought that she might simply disappear from his world one day became an obsession that kept her awake during their stolen nights together. The breaking point came during a weekend at his Mykonos villa. As they lay on silk sheets worth more than most people's cars, watching the Aegean sunset paint the sky in impossible colors, Avery finally gave voice to the demand that had been building inside her for months. "Choose me," she whispered against his chest, her voice carrying the desperation of someone who had nothing left to lose. "Leave her. Leave all of it. We could disappear together. Switzerland, maybe, or Argentina. Somewhere they'd never find us." Her visions spilled out in a torrent of need. A chalet in the Alps, new identities, a fresh start where they could finally stop hiding. 30 days, Kamal. File the divorce papers within 30 days or I walk away forever. The silence that followed felt like the moment before an avalanche. When Kamal finally spoke, his voice carried a coldness that froze her blood. "You're a flight attendant from Phoenix," he said, sitting up and reaching for his silk robe with deliberate casualness. "Did you really think this was real?" The words hit her like physical blows, but he wasn't finished. Standing at the window overlooking his private beach, he continued with the casual cruelty of someone swatting an insect. "My wife is a neurologist who graduated summa cum laude from Johns Hopkins. My son goes to Oxford, where he's studying philosophy and preparing to take over my empire. You serve drinks at 40,000 feet. Avery felt something break inside her chest, but Kamal's next words revealed the true depths of his calculation. "I know about the recordings, Desert Rose. Did you think I wouldn't notice you positioning your phone during our conversations? Did you imagine I was unaware of your little photography sessions when you thought I was sleeping?" From his briefcase, he withdrew a tablet and showed her images that made her stomach drop. Photos of her parents' modest Phoenix home, taken from various angles. Her father leaving for his construction job, her mother gardening in their small backyard. "Accidents happen to people who threaten my family's reputation," he said softly. "House fires, car crashes, sudden illnesses. Dubai has many talented individuals who specialize in solving problems discreetly." But Avery had learned from the master. Over the past months, she had been collecting her own insurance policy. Hidden in her Dubai apartment were recordings that went far beyond their romantic conversations. Audio files of Kamal discussing money laundering through his London properties. Videos of him meeting with known arms dealers. Photographs of documents detailing bribes paid to government officials across 3 continents. "Leave your wife," she said, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "Or I release everything to Al Arabiya News. Your political connections, your business deals, your perfect family reputation. It all disappears with one phone call." She had recorded his conversations about moving money through Swiss banks to avoid sanctions, his casual admissions about bribing city officials in Dubai for construction permits, his detailed plans to sell weapons to questionable buyers in Syria. The evidence she had gathered could destroy not just his marriage, but his freedom. Kamal's expression shifted from condescending amusement to something much more dangerous. "You foolish girl," he said, his accent becoming more pronounced as his control slipped. "You think you're playing chess, but you don't understand the game at all." The threat in his voice was unmistakable, but Avery had passed the point of retreat. She had sacrificed everything for this man. Her family relationships, her friendships, her sense of self. The thought of walking away with nothing was more terrifying than whatever consequences her blackmail might bring. What she didn't understand was that Kamal al-Zurani had built his empire by never allowing anyone to hold power over him. In his world, problems were solved permanently, and people who threatened his family had a tendency to simply disappear. She thought she was playing chess. He was playing war. And in war, There were no rules except survival. October 23rd began like any other day in the rarefied world of elite airways, but the tension aboard flight EW-891 was thick enough to cut with a knife. The manifest listed only 3 souls aboard the Boeing 737 MAX bound for Zurich: Captain Eric Johansson, a veteran pilot with 30 years of experience; Kamal Al-Zarani, traveling on urgent business; and Avery Cole, whose assignment to this particular flight was no coincidence. She had specifically requested the route, trading shifts with colleagues and calling in favors to ensure she would be alone with Kamal for the 11-hour journey across the Middle East and Europe. What she intended to accomplish during those hours remained unclear, even to herself. Perhaps she hoped to rekindle the passion that had once burned between them. Perhaps she planned to make good on her blackmail threats. Or perhaps she simply needed to hear him say, one final time, that their affair had meant something real. The pre-flight preparations unfolded with military precision, but those who knew Avery well would have noticed the subtle signs of her agitation. Her hands trembled slightly as she checked the safety equipment, and she fumbled with the coffee service setup. Small mistakes that would have been unthinkable for someone of her experience and dedication. Her phone, the encrypted device Kamal had given her months earlier, never left her sight, and she checked it obsessively for messages that never came. Kamal boarded with his usual entourage of bodyguards and assistants, but dismissed them all before takeoff. His demeanor was icily polite, treating Avery with the same professional courtesy he would show any elite airways employee. When she offered him his customary Belgian waffles with Turkish honey, he declined with a curt shake of his head. When she asked about his drink preferences for the flight, he responded in monosyllables that carried the weight of finality. As the aircraft climbed through the clouds above Dubai, the weight of unspoken threats filled the pressurized cabin like a toxic gas. Captain Johansson, sealed behind the cockpit door and focused on his instruments, remained blissfully unaware of the psychological warfare unfolding in his passenger cabin. The autopilot engaged as they reached cruising altitude, and the Boeing settled into the long haul toward European airspace. 2 hours into the flight, somewhere over the mountains of Iran, the inevitable confrontation finally erupted. Avery found Kamal in the aircraft's private lounge section, reading financial reports on his tablet with the same focused intensity he brought to everything in his life. The crystal glasses and fine china had been cleared away, leaving only the two of them in a space that had once been their sanctuary but now felt like a battlefield. "Just tell me you love me," she said, her voice breaking as she dropped the last pretense of professional distance. "Tell me that what we had was real, and I'll walk away. I'll delete everything, disappear from your life, and you'll never hear from me again. Just give me that much." Kamal set down his tablet with the deliberate care of a man who had already made his decision. "I love the idea of you," he said, his voice carrying the casual honesty of someone who no longer feared consequences. "I love the fantasy, the escape from responsibility, the way you make me feel like a younger man. But I'd never destroy my life for it." The words hung in the recycled air between them like a death sentence. Avery felt something fundamental break inside her chest, not just her heart, but her very sense of self. The woman who had sacrificed everything for love was being told that love had never existed at all. "Then I'll destroy it for you," she whispered, pulling out her phone with trembling fingers. "One call to Al Arabiya News, and your perfect world burns to the ground." What happened next unfolded with the terrible inevitability of a Greek tragedy. Kamal's expression shifted from cold dismissal to genuine rage, not at her betrayal, but at her ingratitude. In his mind, he had given her everything: luxury, adventure, a taste of a world she could never have accessed on her own. That she would threaten him in return was an affront to the natural order of things. He lunged for her phone, and they struggled over the device that contained enough evidence to destroy his empire. Avery fought with the desperation of someone who had nothing left to lose, but Kamal's strength and fury quickly overwhelmed her. As the phone skittered across the cabin floor, he reached for his briefcase with movements made clumsy by adrenaline and rage. The pistol was an 18th century Ottoman antique, passed down through 5 generations of Al-Zarani men. Its pearl handle was inlaid with gold calligraphy, and its craftsmanship was so exquisite that museums had offered millions for the privilege of displaying it. Kamal had carried it on flights for years, a talisman of his family's power and a reminder of his heritage. But as he drew the weapon, something shifted in the balance of power. Avery's training kicked in, years of safety drills, emergency procedures, and crisis management protocols. The struggle that followed was brief and vicious, their bodies locked together in a dance that could only end one way. The shot echoed through the cabin at 3:47 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, a single crack that seemed impossibly loud in the pressurized space. Kamal al-Zahrani collapsed against the Italian leather seats, his chest torn open by a bullet from his own ancestral weapon. Blood spread across his silk shirt like a dark flower blooming in fast motion, and his eyes stared sightlessly at the cabin ceiling where tiny lights mimicked distant stars. For several minutes, Avery sat frozen, her ears ringing from the gunshot and her mind struggling to process what had just happened. The autopilot continued its steady progress toward Zurich, indifferent to the violence that had just unfolded. Captain Johansson remained locked in his cockpit, his headphones blocking out everything except air traffic control chatter. But as the initial shock faded, something remarkable happened. Instead of panic, Avery felt a cold, calculating clarity descend over her like a protective shell. The same intelligence that had gotten her hired by Elite Airways, the same adaptability that had allowed her to navigate Kamal's dangerous world, now focused entirely on survival. The security cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned, a stroke of luck that she chose not to question. Moving with the efficiency of someone executing a well-rehearsed plan, she accessed the aircraft's emergency equipment storage and retrieved a parachute kit. The cabin door, designed to be impossible to open at cruising altitude, yielded to her knowledge of the aircraft's systems and her desperate strength. At 35,000 feet above the Swiss Alps, with October winds howling through the open doorway, Avery Cole stepped into the darkness and vanished. Whether she survived the jump or plummeted to her death in the mountains below would remain one of aviation's greatest mysteries. All that was certain was that when Captain Johansson landed in Zurich 3 hours later, he found only a corpse and questions that would haunt investigators for years to come. Captain Eric Johansson's routine post-flight inspection became a nightmare that would end his 30-year aviation career. As he unlocked the passenger cabin door at Zurich International Airport, expecting to assist his VIP passenger with disembarkation, he instead discovered Kamal al-Zahrani's lifeless body slumped against blood-soaked leather. The scream that escaped his throat echoed through the empty terminal, alerting ground crew to a scene that defied explanation. The crime scene told a story written in blood and absence. Forensic investigators found fingerprints wiped clean with methodical precision, security footage mysteriously corrupted, and most puzzling of all, Avery Cole's Elite Airways uniform folded neatly in the aircraft's bathroom sink. Her jewelry, the Cartier watch Kamal had given her, the gold bracelet from their Paris weekend, lay arranged on the vanity like offerings at a shrine. The only signs of violence were Kamal's wound and a few drops of blood near the emergency exit door, which hung open like a mouth frozen in an eternal scream. Swiss federal police had investigated countless crimes, but never one where the primary suspect had apparently vanished into thin air at 7 miles altitude. The impossibility of the escape baffled seasoned investigators who found themselves grasping for explanations that bordered on the supernatural. The manhunt began within hours, but the evidence trail was as bizarre as the crime itself. 3 days after the murder, a hiker in the St. Moritz Mountains discovered a torn parachute tangled in pine branches, its fabric shredded by alpine winds but bearing Avery's DNA. Hidden inside a hollow log nearby, investigators found a blood-stained scarf, definitely hers, wrapped around a burner phone containing a single unsent message: "The king is dead. Long live the queen." Footprints in the snow led to an abandoned ski lodge where someone had clearly sheltered for several days. Empty food containers, medical supplies, and women's clothing suggested Avery had not only survived the jump but had planned her escape with meticulous detail. Most shocking of all, financial investigators discovered that a Swiss bank account had been opened in a false name just days before the murder, seeded with $2.3 million transferred from an untraceable cryptocurrency wallet. Interpol issued a red notice within the week, but Avery Cole had become a ghost. Sightings poured in from across the Balkans, a blonde woman matching her description crossing into Montenegro, purchasing supplies in remote Serbian villages, boarding ferries to Albania under forged documents. Each lead evaporated upon investigation, leaving authorities chasing shadows across a continent where disappearing was an art form perfected by generations of fugitives. The aftermath tore through Dubai's elite like shrapnel from an explosion. Dr. Layla Al-Zarani's public statement spoke of her husband's ordeal with blackmail, but her hollow eyes suggested she knew more than she revealed. Their son Omar's cryptic Instagram post, "He chose the lie over the life," sent shockwaves through social media before his accounts went dark forever. Elite Airways collapsed within 6 months, destroyed by scandal and lawsuits. Sky-high scandal headlines dominated international news for weeks, spawning countless conspiracy theories about staged deaths, international espionage, and corporate cover-ups. The aviation industry implemented new security protocols, but no regulation could address the human elements that had made this tragedy possible. 3 years later, the mystery endures like morning mist over alpine peaks. Anonymous tips continue reaching Dubai police. She's alive and she has everything. Bank account activity in remote Balkan locations suggests someone is accessing Avery's hidden funds. Most tantalizingly, the recordings she threatened to release, evidence that could topple governments and destroy careers, remain hidden, a digital sword of Damocles hanging over everyone who knew Kamal's secrets. Did Avery Cole survive her desperate leap into the alpine darkness? Was this murder or self-defense? Where are the recordings that could rewrite Middle Eastern politics? The questions multiply like snowflakes in a blizzard, each one obscuring the truth further. In the Swiss Alps, where secrets fall like snow and disappear just as easily, one woman's desperate gamble for love became either a perfect crime or the perfect escape. The truth, like Avery Cole herself, remains lost in the clouds, a ghost story told in business-class lounges and whispered in the corridors of power, a reminder that even at 40,000 feet, some hearts harbor depths dark enough to hide murder.